you can see there is no dialogue. No dialogue left. So what is the religion that they teach? It's very important. The religion is, as you all already know, is identity politics, which is really cultural Marxism, which I'll explain in a moment. Now, Marxism is a view of the world in which society is divided into warring classes. Remember the Communist Manifesto, the history of all hitherto existing societies is the history of class struggles, which is bunk, but that's what Marxists believe. Well, so what you have, there's two ideas here. There are actually three. The first is that people's class is the determinant factor. And when the Bolsheviks came to power, of course, they set out to eliminate classes like the kulaks. And by eliminate, it was at the point of a gun, which is what they did. So first of all, you erase the individual. Our whole society is built on the idea of individual rights and individual accountability. But if you have a Marxist view, it's about classes. This is classical Marxism. It's Marxism I grew up with. The second idea is that society is divided into oppressors and oppressed. So there's the ruling class, and then there was the working class. And the third idea is that there's a civil war between these classes, and it's a conflict that can only be resolved violently. Now, if you think about it, this had a certain coherence, this idea. And the idea was, of course, that private property, which creates the classes, is responsible for all of the social problems, wars, poverty, and so forth. So if you have a revolution, the revolution was to take away the ownership of the means of production from the ruling class and put everybody in one class. Well, there's a certain coherence to that idea because you wind up, after you've eliminated the bad oppressor class, where everybody is an equal because nobody is an owner of property. This is a delusional idea, and it led to the deaths of 100 million people in the 20th century. Very destructive. If you take away people's identity as individuals, individual merit. I mean, the American idea is so much Martin Luther King's idea that we judge people by the content of their character. However, cultural Marxism, identity politics, is 100 times worse because it sees society as divided into races, ethnicities, genders, and it has this ridiculous, the way they judge who's oppressed is who's marginal. So, I don't know, if you dress yourself up in a dress and have a mustache and, put rabbit ears on your head, of course you're marginal. Just look around you. You're going to be marginal. Now, that doesn't mean you're oppressed. It's just a fact. Jews are marginal. We've been marginal throughout history, and persecuted for that matter. But this is a very pernicious idea that society is divided into an oppressor group based on race, based on gender, or based on sexual orientation, an oppressor group and an oppressed group. And then, of course, the ideology is one of war. There's a phrase for it. I've discussed this before, but it hasn't been picked up by people, but it needs to be picked up by conservatives. People of color. Now, people of color is not a group. It's not a group. There's not an identity of interest. Just ask the Rwandans. You think the Tutsis and the Hutus had a common interest? You think that Pakistanis and Indians have a common interest? They're at war with each other. The example I've given is Mexico, where you have two main ethnic groups: the descendants of the conquistadors who slaughtered the indigenous Indians, oppressors, and the descendants of the indigenous survivors of the indigenous Indians, the oppressed. But when they cross the border into the United States, they're both people of color, therefore oppressed, therefore, marginal, deserving special interests, special allowances. You don't look at what they actually do. They break the law, if they break the law. I'm not suggesting that all Mexican, the left is so good at converting whatever you say into what you didn't say. But it's to convert power on the so-called oppressed groups and deprive the oppressor groups. Well, if you look at the world, Maharajas in India are people of color, beheaders in Syria, ISIS members, they're people of color, Idi Amin and Mugabe and these monsters in Africa, dictators, are people of color. Everybody in the world is people of color except the bad, evil oppressors, white people. The biggest social problem we have in America is a rampant anti-white racism. People talk now, Democrats, people that you would think had brains, talk about America as a white supremacist nation. It's idiotic. It's lunatic. Yeah, there are some Ku Kluxers around. There are some white supremacists. What are there? 500 were in Charlottesville out of a nation of 330 million? The Ku Klux Klan once had, 11 senators and 75 congressmen. Name me the white supremacist, the actual white supremacist, who was a member of Congress. There are some black supremacists in Congress, I would tell you that, but what white supremacists? Same thing with Nazis and neo-Nazis. Those kids are Hitler Youth is what they are, literally. What they were cheering is an organization that wants to exterminate the Jews and says so in so many words, which I actually read more statements from Hamas, but you just have to read the Hamas charter to know that extermination of Jews is their agenda. Now, I could go on and on about this, but this is the greatest problem our country faces. Why are we so divided? Because everybody on the left, everybody who's a progressive, is seeing everything in racial, gender terms and lying about it. Hillary ran a campaign on the idea that the women are somehow oppressed in this country by men, to the extent that there's a gender wage gap, so that women actually earn 24 cents less on the dollar than men for the same work and the same experience and the same jobs. It's a big lie. And Hillary knows it's a lie because she was around when a male-dominated Congress in 1963, people, passed the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act, making it illegal to pay women less than men. And as I've said many times from platforms like this, you can show in one sentence why it's a lie, and that is, if it were true, employers would fire all their male employees, hire women, and increase their profits 20%. It doesn't happen because it's a lie. And yet, where's the media? Where are the referees? Where are the sensible people in our public life pointing this out? They don't exist. And that's because of our corrupted, destroyed educational system.